Okay, welcome to the R-18 mid-cycle for Cinder. Yeah, please sign in on the Etherpad so that we know you were here, and go ahead and get started. Okay. Oh, Luigi's on holiday. Sorry to take up your holiday time, Luigi. So, all right. You can always watch the recording if you have to drop, so that's always exciting. Okay, so I got some general project business we should discuss. So the first thing, I think everybody's noticed that OpenStack as a whole has switched IRC networks to OFTC. I haven't seen any. I've been hanging out in the free node Openstack-cinder, but it looks like nobody else is in there. So that, well, actually, it looks like a lot of people are in there, but nobody's talking. There's 76 people in there, but nobody's actually said anything since yesterday morning, I think, and it was just a joke. So
just change the topic to include Libera, and everybody will get kicked.
Right.
I'll close it down. That'll finish it off.
Okay. So anyway,
the Cinder channel.
Yeah, so just be aware. So I think everybody's aware. If you're not, please make appropriate adjustments. Eric mentioned last time that I mean, you should register your NIC so that you are using it, but we should probably be a little careful about until everybody's registered. Somebody hijacking nicknames. So if people start saying insulting stuff in the channel, take it with a grain of salt. It's probably not who you think it is, because none of us are like that. Okay. One other thing. So the TC is, I'm not quite sure what the source of this is. They're suggesting that people hold meetings in their project channels instead of the meeting channel. So I'm just going to throw that out there. I mean, we have discussed this before and decided that it's hard enough following interleave discussions in a meeting in IRC due to lag and stuff without random people popping into the channel to ask questions sort of out of band. So I'm inclined to stick with the meeting channels also exist in OFTC, so that's fine. I'm inclined to use the meeting channel, but since the TC asked that we consider it, here we go. So does anybody have a strong feeling about it, or?
And just background for me, I think there were two things that caused the question to come up. The first being that a number of other teams have moved away from using the meeting channels, and that they're just doing, in project meetings, and that there are fewer random people coming in causing annoying pings in the middle of meetings. People are, so those people were proposing it so they didn't have to have yet another IRC channel open. If the team's happy doing things the way we're doing it right now, then we can leave it as is. It was just a opportunity to ask the question again, given that we were making a change.
If folks are doing it in their project channel, is the bot in there for starting the meetings and all that stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is now.
Okay.
But, if we're happy doing things the way we're doing them, that's fine too.
Okay.
I kind of like the idea of having an in channel, but that's just me.
Way to buck the trend, Walt.
Yeah, why not? You know me, I'm always difficult.
No.
Well, I'm not against moving to the channel as well, so it sounds, we can try, I think.
Anybody else?
Do we have any dissenters now that it seems like people don't care anymore?
I sort
of like the notion of having an opinion at all.
You must have an opinion, Eric.
All right, well, let's continue to have the meeting where it is, just so that people don't get lost, and we can do a vote or something at the next meeting if we want to do that. Is my proposal. Okay, so there's not that. Okay. Okay. All right, so we'll all right. We have to do the release team likes us to do an early release of OS Brick, so we should do that. So I've got a link to the release patch that you can open up, because in the commit message, it's got a summary of the Git log of what's there. But I also put a link to basically patches that are ready to go. So that might be the yeah, Gorka's got a patch that's showing on the top of mine anyway, for the flush on disconnect. I was looking at that. I haven't voted because I'm only partially through the tests, but it looks fine, of course. But I think we should probably go ahead and get that in before we release. Although I don't know what the status
if
of
possible, I would like also to see Rajat's patch that removes the NVMe stack trace when NVMe is not installed on the system, because it's kind of weird seeing the error and maybe misleading to people looking at the logs.
Those both have +2, so I think that's definitely possible. All right. The Python 2 only patch, I don't remember what that is. All right, let me put up, yeah, I agree about Rajat's patch. Let me put a plus. We're kind of late because we were supposed to release last week, I guess, but
I'm looking at Rajat's patch right now.
okay. Anything else that's oh, I see you got another NVMe OF patch, Gorka.
Yeah, but I believe that will only affect right now Kioxia's backend, and only if they don't don't pre-create the etc-nvme-nqn file.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there is a problem with the current code that it's basically may end up creating a new NQN value for each connection, which is terrible, because it means that instead of having on a node all the requests going with the same NQN, you will get a new one on each request, which is pretty bad, but it's easily solvable. You just create a file and it's fixed. So it could be good to get it in, but I think it's not as bad as the flash problem that doesn't affect Kioxia, but affects the other NVMe drivers.
Okay. All right. Let's. I think what we should do then is I should write this down in the Etherpad. Sorry. Let me. All right. So what I'd like to do is merge these two right, so we've got the flush on disconnect. All right, and I'll finish that reviewing that one later, and then Jay said he's looking at the Rajat's log
Yeah,
patch.
I just merged
Oh,
Rajat
okay.
change because
Okay.
it looked good to me, and if it looks good to Gorka, I think we're good.
Okay.
And I will look at the other one, but I'll let you. Do you want to merge that one, the flush, or do you want me to do it if it looks okay?
I'll do it. Leave your comments on there if you have time to look.
Okay.
Tell you what, why don't you? The basic patch is pretty small. But it's like 100 lines of tests.
Yep.
So I'll start reviewing tests from the bottom. You start reviewing tests from the top, and then if you run out of time, just leave a note saying how far you got, and then when they meet,
Okay.
I'll merge it. And that way we won't waste time. Okay, and then Rajat, can you put up the patch when these merge? So basically, just grab the one that's at line 42, and just go ahead and take over that review and put up a new patch once these get merged. So that hopefully will be, you can do that tomorrow. If what's your schedule like, Rajat? Does that work for you?
Yeah, sure, I can do it. If they merge today itself, then I think I can. Like OSB is pretty fast, so.
Okay. Well, I'll leave a note saying which ones we're waiting for, and then Harvey is pretty on top of this stuff. So if he sees the merge, he may just revise it himself. So if you get a chance, do it. If you don't, I think it'll be fine. Okay, great. All right. All right. I had a backport
When
question.
there is, so there is already the release patch. I just need to modify the hash, right?
Yeah. So that you just asked if there's a release patch already. So or
Xena, right? There is already a patch.
Yeah. So
You
that's the one
mentioned in the 8th effect.
Yeah. So that's line 43. So yeah, so you'll just have to change the hash, then that'll be good. Yeah, and actually ping me, I'll +1 it, and then it'll be ready to go. So that'll be good. And then I got them to. We're not releasing the Python Cinder client until after we get the V2 support removed. So that one's, we don't have to worry about that. Okay, anything else about the OS Brick early Xena release? Great. Okay, next item is a backport question. Okay. Sorry. Someone is in Freenode.
Yeah.
Actually,
Helen's still over on Freenode, I just discovered.
Yeah, can you, let me.
I'm sending her the info.
Okay, thanks.
Yep,
Right.
I got it.
Okay, and then so she can join us here. Okay, actually, it would be good for her to join us right away because this, I think, is her patch.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so this patch, so this is a proposed backport to Queens. So in one sense, I mean, so this is a big patch, but we've been backporting it all the way along because it does seem to fix a problem and it's isolated to a single driver. But in the transition from Rocky to Queens, there had to be a bunch of some other changes were in there, so it's not a clean backport anymore. So I guess the question, so this partially laziness on my part, I guess. So it's going to require sort of a serious re-review because it's different from the other ones. So the question is, if we're not going to allow it, then there's no point reviewing it. So the question is just, what's our general attitude toward this patch? Um, I mean, the plus side is half of it is tests, which is good. So there's a lot of tests in there, but it is kind of a large patch. Does anybody have a?
Which patch are you on?
I'm sorry. It's at line 49 in the Etherpad. It's 760362. So it's with PowerMax, they changed something on the back end around Okada timeframe, but the code didn't start taking advantage of that until, I don't know, Victoria maybe, and then it's been backported along, and this would be the final one into Queens. But there was it's not a clean backport because there were some other changes that were mixed in Rocky that had to be removed.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Uh,
so that
It's a huge patch, but we already merged it to other branches, so we have to be consistent at least with this one.
Okay.
My main thing was, normally, if this were to touch the base Cinder code, we would say no for a backport like this. But, I wanted to raise it given that it's in a driver, and I figured we could say, well, okay, I know that you guys do a decent job of testing and being careful with stuff, but I didn't want to make that exception on my own. I wanted to make sure we got other stable backport people involved as well.
Well, it's a significant bug fix, and if this actually causes problems, we're going to end up chasing it down from our side and fixing it at some point anyway. So
Okay.
I wouldn't be that worried about it.
Okay. So I'll if we can get a couple of people to look through it and make sure the backport makes sense, that the code looks good, then we can merge it.
Okay, that's good. Okay, that settles that. All right, now, I learned last week that OS Brick is not vulnerability managed tagged. So that means that the OpenStack-wide vulnerability management team doesn't pay attention to private security bugs for OS Brick. So I guess I think it probably should be vulnerability managed because we have had a few serious changes that we had to do. Now, the particular bug that brought this up, I think, is still private, so I won't discuss it, except that Jeremy thinks that it could be public. So he left a comment on the bug, even though he's not making an official statement. So the advantage to it being vulnerability managed is that we get another set of eyes on it, basically. So I guess my question is, it may have just been an oversight that we just assumed, because I think what happens is usually the bugs get filed in Cinder anyway. Or sometimes if it's affecting a connector, it also affects the driver, and so both of them are covered. So I don't think it's intentionally left off the list, but I wanted to ask before I proposed that it be covered by the VMT. If you take the link that's on line 54 that explains the vulnerability managed, it's got a list. I noticed that for Glance, Plant Store is covered, and that would sort of be a similar kind of library to OS Brick. So I think we should go ahead and do that, but I wanted to see if anyone else had any ideas or memory about why it's not.
No, I think that would make sense to do.
Okay. I don't think
I don't think there was ever really any discussion about not adding it.
Right.
So I think it was probably just an oversight, and I agree with Eric. I think it should.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, it's important. I agree.
Okay. Great. All right. I'll see what I've got to do to make that happen. Whoops. All right. Thanks. All right. Next thing, there have been some patches showing up in various deliverables, and we're not consistent about this, so I figure we should talk about it real quickly. So this is the link on line 57. It's a OS brick patch. It just has to do with, if you just run Tox, just say Tox from the command line, right? It just will run a default set of test environments. And so the question is, what should it be? Now, so the default list that's there is Pi 3.8, Pi 3.6, and PEP 8. So that covers the two versions of Python that we're currently supporting, plus PEP 8, which makes sense. And then, so if you just run Tox with no further stuff, you're going to run those three things. I guess the problem is, if people don't have both Python set up, something's going to fail. I don't know exactly what happens because I haven't tried that out. I think it'll
just tell you don't have an interpreter that matches that
okay.
Python.
So that's not a big deal. So I guess in Cinder I've had this discussion before. I kind of like running the ones that we're supposed to support because that's what we're supposed to be supporting. But on the other hand, they do get run in the gate. So that's something. The advantage to just saying Pi 3 is that at least you'll run the test using whatever Python 3 the developer has available, which could be 3.9 or 3.7, which we don't actually support. But then again, that would get caught in the gate if there's some kind of problem or in the check.
I don't really like the idea of changing it to Pi 3 because then it's just another point of confusion about what do we actually support and care about. And I don't think that's a really useful thing to do because it's just going to leave it more vague.
Yeah, I think Shauna told me at one point, at least something will be run. Although I guess you don't actually know that either. Okay. Any other?
Yeah. So I'm been one of the people who has been like quite vocal about this because I've seen a bunch of changes like this in all repositories. So my first objection is like ideological one or organizational one. You don't do these kind of things without asking at least on the list first, especially if you want to change it project like on all OpenStack. So that's a -2 for me without even checking the content. Second, even though I cannot put set -2. And second, as Eric said, I mean, it doesn't make sense. If you want to develop something, it's up to you to test with the default configuration. If you deviate in your environment, it's up to you to fix that. And it's not like you cannot do that. You just need to pass explicitly the environment, and then it works. So I don't see like it's such a big issue. It's better to just explicitly list which things we support. That's what I think.
Well, I don't ever just run Tox, but if I did, I think I would be kind of annoyed that it expected me to run 3.6 and 3.8 for every time I wanted to run it. I mean, my opinion is that it should just run the newest one in PEP 8 and then leave everything else to the gate. Yeah, I think it's wasting time for developers otherwise.
I agree.
Well, I always run Tox with the correct environment, so that's probably why I don't.
So for the Cinder client to run the functional tests, you need DevStack. But for Cinder itself, you could run the functional tests, right? Just out of your Tox environment.
Yep, I've run it and it runs fine.
Yeah.
Functional test.
So for the default, would we want to include? Okay, so sounds like we want the Python to be explicit, at least for the default. We want pep8 to get run. Is there anything else we would want in the default environment?
Does anybody use the default environment? Out of curiosity.
Well, that's kind of what I'm wondering too. I'm not sure how much this matters for most people.
I don't. And occasionally I get burned because I missed a pep8 check.
Yeah, I usually use fast8 instead of pep8 because it takes forever.
Yeah, that's smarter. I should do that too. Yeah, I usually do 3.6 and 3.8 unit tests and at least one of the functional test environments. And pep8 when I remember. Then so here's the thing. If we don't really care, then maybe we should go ahead and do just Pi3 because then we won't ever have to change it.
What does that run right now if you go run it with Pi3?
It's just going to be the default Python in your system, the default Pi3. So, and mine, I don't even know because I've screwed with this so much, so I have no idea what the default is.
Well, that's.
I think the default is only.
That's 3.9 for me, and we don't even support that, so that doesn't seem sensible.
Right.
So if we remove that and it defaults to whatever Python you have installed, there are systems that I have installed that are still Python 2 as the system default too.
Well, this is Pi3 default, not Python whatever default. So at least it forces to be the whatever Python 3 version you have as default.
Okay.
But this is actually wrong behavior on Fedora because it'll go run 3.9 and we don't even list that as supported.
But you can be our guinea pig, right?
And what?
You can be our guinea pig, you test, you find everything that is broken in 3.9 and you fix it.
Yeah, I always end up being that guinea pig, but it's not for me. It's for the new guy that's just trying to run Tox and wondering what's going on.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah, okay. So
I agree. We're gonna rerun stuff that we don't even support, so that doesn't seem to make a lot of sense.
All right, I think you've convinced me on that one. All right, so let's see. So basically, what we want. So this is. Okay, so it's aimed at the people who are running the default environment who would just be new people. So we want it to be kind of simple and fast. So let's just say
Fast8 instead of pep8. Yeah, instead of pep8, why don't we run Fast8 if we want it to be fast for the new people?
I've never used it. Does it work well?
The problem, so I use Fast8 all the time, but the problem is it doesn't work right on a series of patches, which is something that I've actually wanted to go fix for a while.
But you can add the environmental variable before running it. It runs fine.
Yes, but again, this is for people who don't know what they're doing. Like I know all that, but we're talking about the guy that just wants to run Tox and have it do something.
How many of those are running series of patches?
I don't know. I'm just saying that the fact that there's an environmental variable that fixes it doesn't help the guy that this is for.
I don't know. Most people, new people, don't do series of patches, but okay, I'm okay leaving it to Pep 8.
I need to go fix the fast date thing to do something sensible where it just runs on all of your locally modified patches, but that's another. Maybe I'll go fix that.
Okay. All right, then. So this will just make it easier to handle these patches going up. So what we want is latest Pi we support and Pep 8. And occasionally we will have to update Tox.ini, but I don't see that as big a problem. Okay. Okay, and then we can stop thinking about this.
Is Python 3.9 somewhere on the horizon, or?
I don't know. I got the feeling, now I don't know where I heard this, but I got the feeling it's going to get skipped for 3.10. But I don't remember why I think that.
Huh.
So there was, yeah. So basically I should just say I don't know. I think it really depends on what, the distributions decide to package things with, because that determines what we support. Okay. All right, so I'll need to action. So we'll just put a statement of this somewhere, and then Luigi can just refer to it as he minuses the patches that keep coming up to change this. Okay, just want to mention I'm on vacation next week, so yippee for me. So probably nobody's even going to notice, but I was just wondering, do we want to go ahead and have a meeting next week or skip it for the weekly meeting? Because I will not attend, so I will have to have a designated meeting runner. But on the other hand,
I'll be gone as well, so I would not be a good designate for that.
What do people think? It seems like most other projects, sometimes they cancel, sometimes they don't. So it's really go either way. I think there's nothing on the agenda yet. Let me look real fast.
I think skipping it's fine.
Yeah, all right. Let me, I'll send out a message. Okay, if anything comes up, there's always the mailing list. So, okay, so the next meeting will be in OFTC is what it's called, right? So it'll be in the meeting channel and OFTC. I'll send out the, okay. All right, and then on the subject of being a well-oiled machine, I just did not follow up on the SQL Alchemy migrate to Alembic thing. Stephen Finucane's got a bunch of patches up. So feel free to review them. I reviewed some of them, but need to do more. And I'll connect up with Stephen. I'll just ask him to come to a Cinder meeting, and we'll talk about what needs to happen. But it looks like things are sort of under control, which I hate to say out loud because that never works. So anyway, we won't actually discuss that today. All right, that's it for general business. Anybody have any concerns or comments or anything? All right, let's get down to business then. All right, so We had like 3 priorities for milestone 1, or did we? I don't know. Anyway, one of the priorities was to get rid of the V2 API, and that has not happened yet. But I would like it to happen. So anyway, the patches are up there. What I'm going to have to do is just ask people to adopt patches and look at them. Because I don't know, they may require revision, so I'd like to do that, get them revised, and get this stuff merged. As far as I know, all consumers of the client and Cinder are prepared for V3. Or let me put it this way, are prepared for the absence of V2. So the Grenade patch merged, Tempest patches have merged, DevStack patches have merged. So I think, and OpenStack client. So I think we're cool. So what I would like, so anyway, so here on the agenda are places for people to sign up. So thanks to Yvonne, who has taken care of the 2 Cinder client patches. So I need 1 more core in each of those. And then the sanity checker could be a core or a non-core, just somebody else to put eyes on this. They're big patches. Main thing is it's possible that there are things missed that we should address. So it'd be good to get them at once. We can always do it in a follow-up. But just in case there's anything, anyway, I would like a sanity check. So at this point, I'm not going to move past this agenda item until people have put their names on the Etherpad. And thanks to Jay also having reviewed one of these. So
I
did something.
took a look at it also. It's looking good, but I will take another look. I have reviewed it briefly.
Yeah, just put your name down somewhere, for the patch, just so that, because we don't want to duplicate efforts, because I know it's one of these things where you may not be able to finish it in one sitting. And the worst thing is to have put a bunch of time into it and come back and see that it's already been approved. So that's why I'd like people to sign up. And then also so that there's a little bit of accountability. That's the thing everybody talks about. And then Alan had I don't know if Alan's here. Alan Bishop had pointed out the first, so the client is split into 2. One is to just get rid of the V2 shell and the auto client stuff that could give you a V2 client. But I really do need to go back and refactor that a bit and restore some tests. So I'll do that as a follow-up, unless people have a really strong opinion about it, which I hope they don't, because I'm going to be on vacation next week. So the I guess I should shut up and let people sign up. But when I started it, when I started the with the first Cinder client patch, I was thinking, well, we're going to have a V4 API eventually. So maybe I should leave, the common class stuff available so that it'll be easy to adapt. But as I did the second patch and just removed all the V2 classes, I realized that was kind of a stupid idea. Because if we do add a V4 API, there's, any remnants of the way things are structured for V2 and V3 isn't going to matter. So I don't think there's any kind of functional problem with the way that first patch goes, but it could definitely use refactoring. But I think it makes sense to do that as a separate thing. But if you have a strong opinion, leave it on the review, please. Hey, and let me tell you that the smallest patch is the that last one that nobody's signing up for, the API ref. Because it's basic. So you're missing out. Thanks, Walt.
There goes Walt.
I heard
Okay.
small patch review. I'm like, okay, my name.
All right, great. Okay, so we got the. If you don't have to be a core to review these. So like I said, anyone can act as a sanity checker. It would be good to have them, but of course we don't absolutely have to. Okay, I'm feel good about that, so I will move along. So so this is going to leave us. So we'll have no client support for V2, but we had decided last cycle that it didn't matter, and I sent a email to the mailing list, and nobody seemed to really worry about that. So there is, if you want to use a client that handles multiple stuff, there is the OpenStack client, although its V3 support is kind of limited.
So do we have to bump the major version if we're going to drop the V2 API from it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So I didn't. So the release team likes the early release of the clients also, but I told them we're not going to release until we remove V2. So it will be a major bump.
So was there anything else we needed to think about changing while we had a nice major version bump opportunity to do that?
I don't know. I mean, what'll happen is because I think this brings us up to 8. It'll be 8.00. The actual official Xena release will probably be 8.1. I'm sorry. Yeah, Yvonne, I couldn't hear that.
No.
I think Ivan is talking to someone else, probably.
Yeah, I guess so. I wasn't really worried about that, Eric. I don't know. Maybe I should.
Well, I don't have any great ideas at hand, so maybe that's fine for now.
Yeah, I guess my main concern was I wanted I was afraid if we don't do this, it'll never happen. So I want the first release during the cycle to have V2 gone, so that it's a settled issue. And then, but it won't be the official Xena release will be whatever we do later around M3.
Sounds good.
Okay. I don't think there's like a general policy other than that we're supposed to do the major version bump. Okay. And that's okay. So that's all about the block storage API v2 removal. So it'll be nice to get that out of the way.
А будут, не будут.
Yvonne, you may have to.
Brian, if you're the moderator, you should be able to mute him. Go to people, look for Ivan, click on the microphone.
I was looking in the wrong place. Got it. Okay, I thought he was saying. Okay.
One other thought on Cinder client things. I guess for these big changes, it would be good to have some kind of test run against like a glance job that's using the Cinder backend and consuming Cinder client. And I don't think we have anything like that in our jobs. So we should probably do a test run through Garrett or something to make sure we're not breaking anything.
Yeah, I've got a. Oh no, I have a different patch. I actually think, Rajat, correct me, but I think we do have a test somewhere using the Cinder Glance store, or were you just talking about adding one?
I think there's maybe one in Glance, but there's not one that's going to test these patches.
Right.
There on the glance gate, there is a job running Tempest test, or like I'm not sure exactly which test are we discussing.
Okay. Well, I guess the main thing was just to make sure that these patches don't break Glance store when it's running Cinder.
Yeah,
We
so
don't even Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So in Usuri, I think Glance store was using V2, and I changed it in my patch. So since Usuri, I think we are using V3 only, a V3 Cinder client. So that shouldn't be an issue.
Can you, if you could put up like, you just put up a, what am I trying to say? A do not merge patch to Glance that will run the test depending on the patch that's at line 81 in the Etherpad. And then just leave a link to it as a comment on the Cinder patch, just so we have verification that with V2 removed, Glance seems to work, and that'll be helpful. So that's a good. So do you have time to do that? Otherwise, we can ask Abhishek, I guess.
Yeah, I will do it.
So I was thinking of the Glance one as one of the corner cases we might miss. It looks like we don't even have a job that would run this through Nova either, which seems odd that we don't gate our changes and send your client against any of these services. Like we really only run unit tests and never mind. There is a Tempest job in there. I just missed it. Okay.
Okay.
So Nova should be hit in that one.
I wasn't even thinking of the client. Okay, so we need.
So it's really just the Glance one that we need to kind of make sure of.
Okay. All right, thanks. I think we'll be good. Okay, any other questions or comments about V2? For the lack thereof. Okay, so it looks like it's finally going to go.
Do we have to change anything anywhere since I think often V2 and V3 are deployed with different endpoints? Do we have to go chase that in DevStack, or is that just O that does that? Or
no, I put up a patch in DevStack, so that's gone. Gautam put up a patch in Tempest. Tempest was already using only V3, but he put up a patch that forget what it does. Anyway, make sure that because you can still test V2. I think it.
Well, hopefully some Tempest job was making sure we didn't introduce regressions into the V2 API.
Right. So he put up a patch. I'm trying to remember what it does, but they have a job that runs. This is what he did. they do have a job that runs V2 against Cinder, and he put up a change so that it will only use Wallaby. It won't use master anymore. So that's taken care of. So V2 is still tested, but it'll be tested from stable Wallaby. I think we got everything else. The only thing I could probably use some input on is for the removing the block storage API v2. I deprecated the I deprecated the enable v3. So I left it there because we hadn't deprecated it yet, but it doesn't seem to do anything. So I deprecated it for removal in Y, which I think makes sense. And I went ahead and removed the enable v2 because it wouldn't do anything anymore, and it had been deprecated. So I guess actually I didn't have a question.
So when you say you deprecated it there, does it still turn off v3 if you turn it
Yeah,
off?
so that's which would seem to be a weird thing, because you'll get your version's response will be an empty list.
Yeah, I would lean toward just making it an option that doesn't do anything.
Yeah, let me see. Yeah, I wasn't quite sure how to handle that.
And probably we should just throw a warning message that says, hey, we're ignoring the fact that you set this to false, and then just don't do anything with it.
Yeah, actually, Rajat flagged that. That's here. Okay, right. So it's true by default.
Yeah,
Yes,
the
I mean,
conf option is a default true value.
yeah. Yeah, tell you what, leave a comment. I would like to do as a follow-up because I really want this thing to get merged.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you have an opinion about what we should do about this, I wasn't sure about changing how it got handled because, I mean, what I wish I had done was deprecated it last cycle, but it didn't even occur to me. Then we could have just removed it. Because I guess what I was thinking was it seems like to keep a deprecated option but make it a no-op doesn't seem somehow to violate the spirit of like keeping it around.
Well, the reason you do that is so that people who leave it in their config files don't get errors thrown at them.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, we've already removed the behavior, whether the option is there or not is the thing.
Right.
It doesn't, like we've already removed all the meaning behind what the option actually does.
Well,
So
well, it still works. I mean, what you'll get is, you'll be running the Cinder API and it won't have any versions.
Right.
So you'll basically get the version response and it won't have anything in it. Which I don't know, might be desired behavior. Yeah, I just didn't know what to do about this. So please put suggestions on the patch, and then I'll do it as a follow-up.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, cool. All right, next thing. So last at the what was it? Oh, the PTG. I talked about this real quick about the CGroup V1 to V2 change. So I had this like great idea that we use libcgroup to handle our current CGroup V1 interactions, and work was being done on libcgroup to be able to handle CGroup V2 also. So I thought that's pretty cool. We'll have a minimal change. It was just going to be like the name of something, and that would be it, and everything would be exactly the same. In the meantime, it's turned out that even though libcgroup version 2 was released, apparently nobody is packaging it, which kind of sucks. So it's not in Bullseye. It looks like Rel 9 doesn't want to deal with it at all. The alternative is to use systemd. So what we could do, and this is, I'm not quite sure. So I talked to Eric a little bit about this. So we can define drop-in slice files that will set the throttling we want to use. And then they would have to be dropped in the correct place on deployment, I guess. And then we could use the systemd run to run the current commands, but in the context of that slice, and that would do the throttling we want. Now, I was looking at this, and we might be able to do runtime adjustment. So you can tell systemd what you want the slice to be, and then I think it rewrites the files itself. So that's a possibility, although I haven't done it and don't know if that would actually work. Now, the reason, I'm kind of incoherent here. So with the current code, we have two options that we're going to have to do something with. And this is another one. I should have deprecated them last cycle, but it looked like we could just use the updated CGroup and wouldn't have to change anything. But we have two options. One defines the name of the roughly the CGroup, I guess. And the other one sets the bandwidth limit. So those are the values, at least so I think the one we would probably ignore. And then the other one, so let me back up. If we went with the drop-in file route, right, that information would be in the drop-in files and would not be in configuration. So this put us in the situation, we would deprecate the options, but they wouldn't be doing anything in Xena anyway. Unless we go with this runtime adjustment thing, because then we could use the bandwidth limit that's set by the configuration option, I think, to set this up instead of using the drop-in files. So I guess what I want to ask people to start thinking about is, well, basically the whole deal. I mean, if we go with the drop-in files, then I guess that means we got to talk to Alan about O support, or we just document it. The other thing is we don't really know, or let me put it this way, I don't know if this feature is widely used or at all.
Well,
and I don't think it's tested anywhere.
The purpose of this feature, I think, was to prevent overloading nodes that are in the I/O path doing generic volume and is the main thing, and maybe one or two other I/O operations. I think that as far as how to use CGroup's v2, I think what we want to do is just have Cinder generate splice files that we can pass to systemd run with the user command, with the user parameter. And it'll be fairly similar to what we do today with CGexec, but we just would generate a file and then run it with systemd run instead of CGexec, I think is the idea. And we could just have Cinder spit out whatever file it needs based on the configuration whenever we need to run it.
Okay. All right, and that's fine because then that would allow the bandwidth setting to still be meaningful because we would just pull it out of there. Okay. Okay, that's basically all I had about that. All right. So I'll continue to work with Eric on this. And we'll come up with something.
You need to scroll your Etherpad computer down.
Sorry about that. Okay. All right. Any questions, comments? All right, so we'll get something up so that as a patch for comments. So just be aware that's coming eventually. Okay, on to specs. Okay. We don't have too many specs proposed, but let's take a quick look. We've got some usual suspect specs that I think we're going to need to be more explicit about what revisions we want. Okay, so allow volumes to be part of multiple volume groups.
Yeah, that one's interesting. Because that can have a lot of implications about how certain Cinder operations work that I don't know are really spelled out. But one thing I wonder is if it's really the right idea to put a volume in multiple groups, or if what they really want is to have one group that's both a consistency group and a replication group, and they're just going this direction because it seems like the easy way to go based on what we have currently. It also doesn't spell out semantics. Like if you delete a volume group, it deletes the volumes, right? Currently. So this spec has to spell out how all that's going to work if it's in more than one group, because it's very not obvious what the implications are of that.
How do we feel about the volume group DB table?
Well, I'm still stuck on
Do we really need
the problem description and use cases so far don't explain why the answer is to put them in multiple groups versus having the ability for one group to have more properties to do what you want it to do. And we should probably at least consider that, because that might be easier to do than mapping things into multiple groups.
All right, any other thoughts about that one? Okay. Eric, did you just add that line? Was that yours?
Yeah, needs some review.
Okay.
I think everybody was pretty okay with the concept last time we talked about it, but nobody's done anything
Actually
with
looked
it.
at it. Okay. Yeah, that looks basically what we discussed at the PTG that's in there now. So that's
I was just looking at this update original volume AZ spec.
I had notes on this somewhere.
I mean, I think one summary of this spec might be to support the ability to change the AZ on a backend that you're using at all. Because it sounds like this is really about when you change it, things don't work. And so we need a way to patch that up. So the feature itself might be more, you know, actually be able to change the AZ of a backend that has volumes on it.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know what kind of implications that has if you have volumes attached to instances and things, and then you change that they're in use.
I think we should probably make this cinder manage command, like the one we have to change the host directly for volumes. Such.
Yeah, that's the proposal in the spec, is to make it a cinder manage command.
And do we need a spec for that?
Yeah, because we don't know how it's
Okay.
supposed to work. Things like volumes that are attached to instances and what it might cause to happen when you do that. I don't know if the prerequisite is that they need to all be unavailable, or we're going to do it for in-use volumes, or, you know, I'm not sure what happens if you change this as far as other services that are consuming these volumes.
Because, for example, for the host, we don't have any kind of check. We just change them.
When do you use the command to change the host?
Apparently, according to the code, to recover from cases where one has moved their cinder backup node and not set, no, sorry, wrong command. That's the backup. The backup. It doesn't say.
I guess the other thing is snapshots. I think this information isn't stored for snapshots. It's sort of inferred from the volume that it's a snapshot of.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Okay. All right. Okay. So,
but I'm wondering if we're going to add this, if we should also try to cover like backups as well.
but yeah, because backups have they specifically have an availability zone property.
Yeah.
And groups also have availability zone. And consistency groups.
Well, that's what I was starting to think too. Is if the volume is in a consistency group, presumably, if you want to change the AZ of that volume, you want to change it for all the other ones in that group and for the group. And if you just change it, it's going to break other things.
Yeah, we definitely have to change all that apply.
Well, I was writing a comment on the spec, so I'll go ahead and leave that one as a comment on the spec for now. But yeah, I think we have to basically validate a lot of things like that. We can't just let people do this on whatever volume.
Yeah, mostly because, like you said, the attached volumes may then fail a migration. For example, a Nova migration, they migrate the instance and suddenly they cannot succeed because the availability zone doesn't match and Nova is not configured to allow cross AC attachments. Yep. But I think it is a worthwhile proposal, as in something that I know at least a customer that has wanted to do this. But Eric is right. We need to think it through.
Well, if we don't add a cinder manage command for it, people will just be hacking it in their databases anyway, and it'll be worse. So we should probably control it.
Exactly.
So with the when you define a backend, you can specify the availability zone for it, right? And so that's what we're talking about here, is putting a different name in the config. And then, are there any implications for volume types?
It can have. If you have a volume type that defines the availability zone, you would have to update it. Otherwise, it could not go to that backend. But in that case, I don't think it's too much to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
From the perspective, we can just mention it in the documentation of the command, as in, please update your volume types if they include the availability zone. But yeah, it should be documented to remind people.
Okay. All right, that's good. That gives some feedback for this person to work with. Oh, and then this is an old favorite.
Did we have any pending questions on this from the last time we talked about it? Also, your Etherpad screen is behind again. But were we still trying to gather any info on backend support or anything about this?
I haven't looked at it since the last revision, so
All right. Yeah, I was just looking at the BTG notes on it,
Okay.
which basically just said good for backends that can do it quickly, and if not, it's still a useful feature, even if you have to do it the slow way. So we should really just review it and try to get that moving.
I think the main question was, I think there were two things that you had, Eric, last time. One was that once you start doing like a middle reversion, you start to get a tree instead of a linear grouping of the snapshots. And then how is the end user supposed to think about it?
Yeah, I mean, I think for now, we're just going to have to assume that people that want to visualize that are just going to use the parent ID fields in the snapshots.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think we
should probably mention in that fact in the driver header of the method, as in make sure that if you support the driver specific mechanism, that you will get a tree that they can delete anything in there, as in you get the tree, they start deleting this thing, that other, that they must be able to work independently once you create that hierarchy tree. I think it's worth mentioning in the doc string of the method to make sure that vendors don't make the mistake of just assuming that because they can do the revert, everything is fine.
Yeah, we're going to have to write a lot of tests around corner cases of this, because especially drivers that support attaching a snapshot are going to have to be able to do I/O on a snapshot that's on a different branch of that tree compared to the one that's actually, you know, the active top of it.
Should we ask a more detailed testing section to include that kind of detail?
Yeah, I mean, we don't normally do that well at that, but we really should list out like all the various scenarios we need to test, because there's, I think, like a dozen of them for this that we need to figure out how we're going to do with tempest tests or whatever.
Yeah, and probably we should start trying to require the tempest test to be at least proposed before merging the feature, or at least this kind of feature, that it's a bit scary, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, because right now the testing section just says add related tests.
Well, it said unit and functional tests. We need integration tests, actually, but yeah. I also think we probably don't want to make an interface with a method called revert to middle snapshot.
And reading this spec brings me to a question: should we add a nicer mechanisms to see what features are supported by each driver. For example, when I added the active, I added to the class an attribute in uppercase, as in, yeah, active supported. Now we are talking of doing something slightly different. So should we look for something that the code can introspect from the manager? Not the feature that Eric wants, which is kind of user-facing, but one that the manager can check.
Well, unfortunately, the feature that Eric wants is highly related to that stuff. And we've already got a couple of different ways that we pass such features from drivers up to other places. So it makes sense, but it's not at all clear what the best way is to actually do that.
And this feature is going to add yet another one, and I'm hoping maybe not to make your life harder for the other feature.
Yeah, I think there's currently 2 or 3 different ways that drivers tell Cinder that they can do certain things or not. And I mean, we have to do it somehow for this because we have to know how to revert to the generic path at any rate. But at the moment, I don't know what to even propose for how to best mark them that way.
Okay. For me, in terms of, yeah, because ideally we would want to be able to expose this, not only the Cinder manager code, which can be easily done with just a variable there, but also to users and to the scheduler and things like that.
Well,
because this could be something that a user wants to ask the scheduler, right? When I create a volume.
The other problem is it's not clear if it's even going to be a static thing that this driver supports this. It might be tied to some license you have to buy on the back end to enable this feature, in which case you have to dynamically report it. And that's a thing for some of the big arrays that we support in Cinder.
So we would have to have true state, as in I don't yet know, yes and no, and it would be a property or something like that. Okay, yeah, I see.
Because even if the driver supports it, you don't always know that the backend is actually able to do it. And for this kind of thing, it might be relevant.
It would be mostly relevant for if we want to get that information without running Cinder, because when the Cinder volume is running, the Cinder volume service is running, it doesn't matter if it's dynamic or not. As long as it is initialized, you will have that information.
All right, and then I'm not understanding lines 47 through 52 in the spec.
I think that's talking about the day.
I guess, so if there's a chain of 10 snapshots and they revert to 3, they cannot revert to 7. So does that mean all the more recent snapshots are invalidated if you do the reversion?
I'm not sure.
Or I'm not, yeah, okay. I guess I should just leave it.
I'm also not sure. I think this might be missing some semantics that are important about how this works. Did we have a previous spec on this years ago? So what I'm trying to figure out is if you have a chain of snapshots and you revert to, so let's say you have snapshots A, B, C, D, right? And you revert to snapshot B, and now you're running there in your chain and you're writing data. That means that snapshot C is like changed unless you create another snapshot in the middle of the chain, right? I guess it depends on how it's implemented on the back end. But in cases where you can like attach a snapshot and just use it, if you implement revert by doing that, then I think you mess your chain of snapshots up. But the spec might need to kind of walk through how that's going to work on. I mean, I guess it depends on how your backend is going to implement this exactly. Because you can't revert to an old snapshot and then write data and then have that change the data that was inside of, you know, a newer snapshot. But whether that would happen just depends on how the backends are actually doing this. So I don't know.
But in any case, from the Cinder perspective, it could be the driver's kind of problem because there's nothing Cinder can do beside the generic snapshot mechanism, right?
Yeah, but
so it's about testing.
The spec needs to tell driver owners that it is their problem, though, so they don't just write something that looks like it works but doesn't act right.
Yeah, that's why I was mentioning also to say it in the doc string. But you're right, it must be also in the spec, not only in the doc string of the method, but reflected in the spec. Well,
Okay. All right. I think this will give them something to work with to respond. Okay.
We also need to just reinforce that, like, the basic Cinder semantics of how snapshots work are still supposed to function. So, I mean, if you revert to snapshot A, you're still supposed to be able to go delete snapshot A. You know, it can't be in use or, you know, held up or whatever. So, I mean, all the normal API semantics are expected to still work. And I suspect that if we're not really careful, at least some drivers will kind of trip over that kind of thing.
What was an example of that again?
So if you revert to old snapshot A, you still have to be able to just delete that snapshot at any point, even if you're, you know, quote, using it.
Yeah, and on that line, if you have that snapshot A, you revert to it, you start writing data on that volume, and now you create a volume from that snapshot A. It should have the content of the original snapshot, nothing related to the new volume, the revert that you have done.
Yeah, you can't modify data in a snapshot.
Yeah, which is something you mentioned earlier. Yeah.
And I mean, this is all it's kind of obvious, but if we don't spell it out, somebody will mess it up. Got to make sure we spell it out.
And besides the spelling out, everything we are spelling out should be done in Tempest test or functional or however we want to do it to make sure that we don't break everything.
Yeah, I think there's some good examples of, I was working on an encrypted volume test recently, and there's a pretty good pattern for knowing how you can create a volume and write some files to it and clone it and snap it and whatever, and then make sure it's still there. So I think we have kind of a framework where we know how to do that kind of tests in our Tempest plugin.
Yeah, I think Rajat has used it in one of his Tempest tests. So yeah, I think it's there.
Okay. So we still enthusiastically support this idea, but we want more details, even more enthusiastically. All right, is there anything? Yes, let's take a look at this one. I still have a -1 on it, but I don't even remember.
So that spec needs some details too, because if you want to migrate a volume that's replicated, is the assumption that we're going to guarantee that it's still replicated after you migrate it?
Do we currently prevent it, replicated volume to be migrated?
I'm not sure.
Because
That's what spec claims at line 16.
Mhm.
And it makes sense that we prevent that, because I guess if you migrate a volume that's currently replicating, how do you not orphan the replica of it? there's probably a lot to handle there to make sure you do the right thing with the replica.
Well, in theory, the generic migration, which is basically copying, should have zero problems because you create a replicated volume on the destination. You copy the data, which is going to be replicated on the destination and the source. When you delete it, the replica should also disappear. So the generic path is fine.
I think
It is
about the non-generic path though, because
that is where drivers would have to make sure that it actually works as it.
Yeah, because it's saying they want to migrate from one pool to another pool on the same backend, which means it's probably not the generic.
So again, another flag on the driver saying, I support this thing.
Well, this needs to spell out what's supposed to happen. I mean, is the implication that they want to move the source and not move the replica and then still replicate to it? Or are they just going to delete the replica and then replicate it to a new one? You got to kind of spell out what's supposed to happen in this situation, I think.
But should we spell out the details or just spell out the desired outcome? And once you complete it, the new volume or the volume should still be replicated and should be able to fall back and do all the normal operations. Is that enough? And each driver must do what they have to?
Well, yeah, if we spell it all out, we also have to make sure we document things like if you do this migration, there's going to be a period where your volume is not replicated until it replicates again. And you have to be aware of that as an admin.
But that's only if your replication is asynchronous. If it is synchronous, it's probably not the case.
Right, but as I recall, Cinder doesn't even know if it's synchronous or asynchronous in general because we don't keep track of that stuff.
Yep. And that's probably an improvement we should look into, being able to tell them apart. Though it's problematic because it can depend on how the backend is configured. I know that Walter probably can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the 3-bar has all kind of mechanisms. You have it can do the replication asynchronously, synchronously, and it depends on how you configure it on the backend.
Yeah, there's multiple ways to configure that.
There's an odd note at the very bottom of this spec about multi-attach helping with this. I'm not really sure what that means.
Um,
There's probably also implications for backends that do replication based on pools, as far as how you handle this. Or maybe not in the, if we're gonna just tear down the old replica and make a new one, but that might be something we have to consider in this.
okay. There's enough. All right, so we need more information. All right, I think that was it for open specs. And okay, Rajat, I'm sorry, we're running low on time.
Sure, it's not that important. I thought it would be a good idea, but I don't think it matters much. I have a presentation ready. I can share it if anyone is interested to look into it.
Okay, I think it's worth doing because we want to. I mean, Gorka's making a big effort to keep these things updated, so we should all be aware of this. But we could maybe. About how long is your presentation, do you think?
Might take at least 10 minutes.
We could. Why don't we do it at the video meeting at the end of the month? Which would be June 30th. So I imagine it would be much better to do it on video than in IRC.
Yeah, works for me.
Let's do that. Let's do it at the next video meeting. So I think it's worth going over. Okay.
Could you just record yourself doing a presentation and we could watch it later, kind of thing, instead, so we don't have to wait until the end of the month? Or
do that, or we could have a impromptu video meeting earlier in the month.
Yeah. The doing screencasts is pretty cool because you can record that whenever, and we could actually add a URL to it at any point in the Cinder channel as well as on the mailing list. And I don't know.
I'd watch it.
Yeah, I would think that would be cool.
Or the other possibility is we can just do it now.
It's lunchtime, man. What are you talking about?
Yeah, that's true. All right. Well, Rajat, think about what you want to do. I don't want to. I guess my thing about asking you to record it is I don't know that we lose the captive audience situation where people are definitely going to see it because they're there. So I don't know. So it's sort of up to you. I mean, although if you record it, we could play it at a meeting.
Yeah.
And then everybody would be captive as well as having it available. Anyway, I'm sorry we're running out of time. So think about what you want to do. And we're flexible. We can do something.
I don't have any problem with the video, but like if anyone has any doubts regarding that, so that I won't be able to know. So.
Yeah, it might be the kind of thing where it would be better to have it interactive so you can answer questions. Okay. All right. We'll discuss. All right. So no meeting next week. I'll make sure I send something out. Please review the V2 removal specs patches that you signed up for. And I guess that's pretty much it. So thanks for attending. I'll stop the recording now.